community leaders, compassionate supporters. No matter what your professional title may be, we all share these identities today, and on behalf of Cal Heritage, I bid you welcome to our California Cannabis Policy Architects Roundtable discussion. My name is Eric Gudz, Chief Operating Officer for Cal Heritage, and I'm honored to be your guide for this morning's discussion. For a wonderful variety of reasons, you have all chosen to make the stop along your own journeys to share your insights, your questions, and your perspectives at this pivotal point in California cannabis policy. Warmly united and committed to a more compassionate future, I thank you all deeply for joining us here today. Nearly 20 years after the passage of the Compassionate Use Act in California, our state stands upon the precipice of monumental cannabis change once more. The decisions that our policymakers and local leaders make this year on cannabis policy will have global ramifications. Make no mistake, the rest of the world is watching. No pressure to our distinguished elected officials present here today, of course. Just as when California took the lead on cannabis policy nearly 20 years ago, the need for inclusive and respectful dialogue is vital to our collective success in this endeavor. Reflecting on this monumental challenge, I am inspired and encouraged beyond measure by all the creativity, compassion, and dedication I sense in this room here today. Most encouraging of all is the thought that despite the nearly 60 years of ups and downs in our state's cannabis community, we have always found the strength in each other to persevere through our greatest challenges. For our discussion today, we have assembled some key perspectives to consider as we all work together on the challenging cannabis policy decisions of the future. While their input is important as architects of our state policy, the most important perspectives in this conversation are the ones that each and every one of you bring with you today. For this reason and many others, we hope that you feel comfortable enough to ask your questions and contribute to the conversation so we may all benefit from your unique perspectives. To begin our discussion officially, it's my honor to introduce you to a policymaker who is familiar by many within this community already. Earning the reputation as one of the leading trailblazers of California cannabis policy, Assemblymember Ken Cooley has answered the call, along with other leading policymakers in the Assembly and State Senate, to work through today's challenging cannabis policy issues in California. Assemblymember Cooley was elected to the California State Assembly in November 2012. He started his elected public service career on Rancho Cordova's first city council upon its formation in 2002, winning re-election in 2004 and 2008. He also served as mayor in 2005 and again in 2010, when the city was recognized as an All-American city. Assemblymember Cooley is chair of the Select Committee on Foster Care and serves on the Select Committee on Asian California Trade and Investment Promotion, Select Committee on Civic Engagement, Select Committee on Local Emergency Preparedness, Select Committee on Homelessness, and Select Committee on Science, Technology, Engineering, Math, Education. He is also a member of the committees on Government Organization, Insurance, Rules, Public Employees, Retirement and Social Security, and serves on the Alfred E. Alquist Seismic Safety Commission, as well as Lieutenant Governor's California Commission of Economic Development. Recently, Assemblymember Cooley was a key author in the Medical Marijuana Regulation Safety Act of 2015, which was the result of the combination of AB 266, AB 243, and SB 643, representing months of arduous compromise and diplomacy from hundreds of interests. As an advocate, a business owner, and a veteran, I want to extend my personal gratitude for your leadership and dedication towards this vital issue in many communities across the state of California. Please join me in welcoming Assemblymember Ken Cooley.
Well, good morning. It's a pleasure to join you. And I thank you all just for coming out for the whole convening what's going to happen here in the conversation today on this sort of stormy, wet morning here in Sacramento. We're grateful for the rain, though my usual 20-minute commute took an hour this morning. So I was just sneaking here in under the wire, I felt. So welcome here. Just to talk a little bit about myself, you know, it's funny, you listen to that bio, you hear all those issues roll by. I do have a big interest in science technology. You heard I'm on a select committee dealing with that. Every 2 years, I actually run a camp out for middle schoolers from Rancho Cordova. We do a 4-day math science camp, so I'm all in on science technology education, which is very important to the ongoing growth of our economy, which is essential to producing jobs. Homeless interests me. In my city of Rancho Cordova, 8 churches are providing a week of shelter these 2 months against the winter cold. I was out one night last week between 1 and 3 in the morning at a local church, just seeing what we were doing, caring for people. I first touched the issue of earthquake back when I was a student at Cal, and I advised the Assembly on banking insurance issues at the time of the Loma Prieta earthquake, which was the late 1980s. So I've sort of touched earthquake issues for a long time in my career. And my service on the Seismic Safety Commission is my second time actually on there. And this goes generally sort of the background. The legislature as an institution today is very interesting. 80 members in the state assembly where I serve, and 65, I think, of the 80 are either brand new, meaning last year was their first year here, or they're members of my class, meaning we have 3 years under our belt as legislators. So this is pretty remarkable to think of it. Our governing institution, state assembly, 65 of the 80 are either brand new or 2 years new, 3 years new. I actually started in the building. I'm sort of unusual in the sense that straight out of Berkeley, I got hired as the chief to a rules chairman in the assembly back in 1977. I spent the first 8 years of my career running the Capitol office for a part of Democratic leadership, 77 to 82. I did law school at that time. Patrick Leathers, who represents you as a lobbyist, and I went to the same law school here in Sacramento. And I was out for a few years in the practice of law, and then the Assembly asked me to come back in to run a major policy committee, banking, finance, and insurance. And I did that in the late 1980s. That's when I got involved with the Loma Prieta earthquake. My law practice itself, 20 years in the private sector, all revolved around the legislature, legislative public policy, ultimately here and in California. I was often sort of what I describe as a smoke jumper, flying into state capitals to deal with contentious issues where what I knew was the policy and how to work within the legislative environment, not necessarily the local lawmakers. And then as described, I was a founder of the City of Rancho Cordova, served in the League of Cities Governing Board. In 5 years, I went from being one of thousands of council members to the number 2 officer in the League of Cities. Would have been president, but I took a job, the Senate recruited me for a job. And so I stepped back. So I'm just in my 3rd year as a legislator, but I've actually have 39 years of continuous legislative work. And it's an unusual portfolio to bring to my work here in the Capitol. And it greatly influenced how I saw the whole medical marijuana conversation unfolding. Members that were elected in the election cycle 2 years prior to mine had only 6 years to serve. Starting with my class, elected in 2012, we can serve up to 12 years in the legislature. And that was actually a key fact to my interest in medical marijuana. 12 years is a good bit of time, but it makes me aware that we cannot move our state forward if we do not find the wherewithal in the institutional legislature to tackle some big issues that have festered for a long time and bring them home. Sort of my mental image of my work, I can't tell you how often in my career I've been in LAX or San Francisco late in the evening, ready to hop on an airplane. And you've all had this experience when you look out to the east if you're in LAX or the south if you're in San Francisco. At dusk, you can see the headlamps of those airplanes all queued up, ready to come in and land. And this, to me, is sort of the picture of California. We need to land some of these big public policy issues. And my view of this issue was we need to take this issue that has been fought about for a long time. We invest all this effort in a legislative year And session after session, you get to the end of the year and the wheels come off. So the next year you have to start all over. And so I just jumped in actually into the medical marijuana issue, believing that I need to try to create some institutional momentum, solve some big problems, land those planes. And if I do that, then I will be a part of a generation of lawmakers who are historic, because we start on many different fronts, starting to move California forward. And the medical marijuana grew out of a strong collaboration. We had multiple members with bills. My own bill was 266, which may not sound familiar to you, that would be a Cooley bill. 266 was my bill, and it was the bill that actually was getting the most votes as we went through the Assembly committee process. But there was an interest in trying to bring the different authors together. And in the Appropriations Committee, someone got the idea, this was out of the leadership office, that Mr. Bonta and I should work to kind of merge language and put it into a third bill. And I was the one that actually said, well, no, that's a basic strategic error, because 266 is already enjoying broad support. What we ought to do is work on trying to figure out an agreeable way to blend the two. And then what I'll suggest is that Rob Bonta, my colleague who had the other bill that was not drawing as many votes as mine, that he should become the lead on what had been my bill. And I would take the second position. And we actually did something that you wouldn't necessarily know, but I became the principal on his bill, which we left behind. And we amended his bill, which we left behind, to be identical to 266 as it was amended at the Appropriations Committee. And this too was my idea, because it allowed Rob and I to document that you could not put a sheet of paper between his position on this issue and my own position coming out of appropriations. And I felt that would be important to kind of establish the genuineness that this is a common initiative put together by members of the Assembly. When we did that first set of amendments, Mr. Tom Lackey, my Republican colleague, came off the bill, because you can't leave his name on it when you've amended it underneath him. That would be inappropriate. He's a member of the state legislature under the Constitution. You don't do that to people. But immediately, I talked to him the next day. He said, Tom, you want to be back on this bill? I think this is a good bill. I'm going to have people brief your staff, but I think I'd like you on the bill as my partner. He was on the bill from the get-go, and he quickly rejoined. So I cannot express enough how important this process of collaboration was, to get membership across the aisle, to be listening. We sort of managed it as we went forward. I remember having this conversation with my staff, saying, or all the staff, saying, the members, Rob Bonta, Reggie Jones-Sawyer, Mr. Lackey, myself, we should be sort of like the pickets, if you can think of a military example. We're out there in contact with sort of various forces. We should have the discipline as legislators not to say when someone brings an issue to us to say, I'll fix it, because one can't say I'll fix it when it's a collaboration of four. But we should be alert to issues that are pending. Someone brings it to us, say, okay, I'm going to take that into our process. And that too is how this process unfolded. We, as members, became sort of the eyes and ears of the conversation, and then as new facets came up, we sort of fed it into our staff teams, which included Republican staff, Mr. Lackey's staff, and all the other folks, and sort of worked things through. And in doing that, we sort of, I would say, built a common ground, a common understanding of the problem, built confidence in the process, and moved it on forward. It was there was some tumult there at the end, and I can remember personally, it's just funny, I mean, I've done this for a long time, I have a different perspective on the process. I remember talking to Nate Bradley here up the street at a bar called Mayuel, and pointing out to him that in this process, meaning the legislative process, people are often beaten in spirit before you are beaten in fact. people often feel that the process seems so Byzantine. There's so many hidden agendas. There's so much going on that you just feel like the battle's lost. And I was sort of like, steady as she goes, Nate. You know, people get beaten in spirit for their beaten in fact. I think things can still work out. And on the very next to last day of session, which might have been the last day, I actually sent a text to my colleagues, my co-authors, at 4 in the morning. You can tell what sort of life I lead. And I just said, well, you know, today's the last day. Could be the last day. The Senate might adjourn early. That's always a possibility. And we were having some battles as to who's going to get the limelight from this. There was some of that people felt was going on. And I remember sending a text at 4